Welcome back. So how many people are using drones and how flexible are the government's new rules? The Federal Aviation Administration estimates there will be 2.5 million drones in use by the end of the year. The agency projects it will grow to 7 million by 2020. The biggest increase will be in commercial drones, with the number expected to quadruple in 4 years. While new rules are just going into place, there is a waiver available to work around some of the restrictions. For example, Disney World's nighttime light show, which is centered around LED lit drones, was able to get an exception. So what do you need to know about the new rules? And joining us for more on the topic is Gene Payson, Chief Pilot Trainer for Unmanned Vehicle University. He also pilots unmanned aircraft for the United States Air Force. Lionel Gilbert, Manager of Airport Operations for the Sarasota Manatee Airport Authority. And joining us by Skype is Paul Aiken, Chief Pilot of Drone U. He also co-hosts the Ask Drone U podcast and is the author of Living the Drone Life. We have our own drone right here. I wanted to fly it around the studio for this, but nobody would let me do it for obvious reasons. Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. And I guess the first thing that people should know is there are one set of rules for the hobbyists out there, or the dad who's buying the gift for the kid, and another for professionals, whether it's professional photographers or folks in TV news, right?
Exactly right, Alan.
And some people think that's a little bit unfair, that you could have a father and son or a father and daughter out there who get it for the holidays and could do whatever they want, but people in the professional world have to come under stricter rules and regulations. Why is that?
It's sort of like with a driving license as well, is that if you're driving, for fun, or you're driving as a commercial overland person, then you need to have a little bit higher standards that you have to live up to.
And Paul, here's the thing: the practical applications for these drones, if it's about from television news, flying above a news scene, or in real estate, shooting incredible video of homes that are for sale, that would be incredible applications for that. So why is that not permitted right now?
Well, some of those things are permitted. It's just how you do those actions. As a commercial operator, there are, like you said, thousands of practical applications, and real estate is just really hitting the tip of the iceberg. We have so many other real-life scenarios that we can use drones, like, for example, crime scene mapping. Imagine if there was a crime scene and we could literally map out that whole area, get everything that we need to know right there in 15 minutes, clear the crime scene. Isn't that better for society if we're clearing traffic and making life easier for people?
Right.
Isn't it better if we're able to do search and rescue?
But when it comes to television news, for example, from my understanding, you have to file a flight plan with the FAA, which is really doesn't help you if you're trying to get to a scene of a news story that is breaking at the time.
Under Part 107, as long as you are in a specific airspace, you do not have to file a flight plan. Now, if you're near an airport within 5 miles, say, of a Class Charlie or Delta airport, yes, you would have to get an authorization, a COA, for example, to fly in that airspace. Yes, it's true the FAA is taking a long time, and they're expecting us to give them 90 days, which is really unrealistic for, just like you said, news stories and many other types of journalism, where we only have hours and sometimes days to get the shot, and we don't have 90 days to give that notice.
And Lionel, you could understand why the FAA is very cautious about this, including at the airport. Have you had any incidents there?
Yes, we have in the past couple of years, 4 incidents that were recorded. Twice a visual sighting of a drone in the area, once by a concerned citizen on the north side of the field, and another time by an airliner pilot coming in on landing at about 500 feet. So those were definitely of concerns. And then 2 other incidents where we actually found drones on the airfield. One, the owner contacted us because he said he lost contact with it. And another one, we just found it on a remote area of the field.
What kind of damage can something like this do to an aircraft that's trying to take off or land?
Well, the aircraft are designed to take some kind of damage, but mostly from animals like birds and wildlife. So they'll withstand soft tissue and things like that. We don't know exactly what a drone damage can do to an engine, stall the engine, damage the impellers, and really stall the engine on takeoff, which could be really disastrous for an airplane.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have to have, we're going to have much more on drone regulations coming up, but when we return, we'll bring you a check on your local weather forecast, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing new regulations for drones from the FAA. Our guest tonight are Gene Payson, Chief Pilot Trainer for Unmanned Vehicle University, Lionel Gilbert, a Manager of Operations for the Sarasota Manatee Airport Authority, and joining us by Skype is Paul Aiken, Chief Pilot for Drone U. And Paul and Gene, this question is for you. Obviously, as we saw in Adam's story, these drones are flying off the store shelves right now, and there are going to be a lot of people who are already out there and will be out there by the end of this month flying around with these drones who are not as trained as you are. Are you concerned about what could happen? And I've seen a lot of pictures of accidents and the injuries that they cause.
Well, I think there's going to be some injuries and things like that, but I've been a hobbyist since I was 12 years old, and I've had my share of nicks and scrapes, and I've got my drones lost here and there along the way. But most people, I think, are pretty cognizant that they don't want to injure themselves or others, so they're pretty careful as hobbyists go.
And Paul, you know, there is a big difference between the family going out and flying these drones as a hobby. There are people out there who, let's just be blunt about it, do stupid things.
Oh yes, clearly we see people flying over other people all the time. We see these issues, but I agree with Gene. A lot of people have been successful hobbyists for a long time. Yes, I would love to see more education and more of a step from local retailers and national retailers to offer education and training from either Gene's group or myself's group. I mean, the amount of people flying right now is astronomical, and I think there's actually there's a very close correlation between the number of actual pilots in America and the number of drones sold in America, and I think those two numbers are actually pretty close.
Lionel, here's the big question, and we did ask the FAA to be on tonight, and they would not do so, but the question is, who enforces these rules? Because the airspace is controlled by the FAA, but what's their closest local office?
Well, the closest is in Tampa, but the regional is in Atlanta.
So when you've had these incidents at the airport, who comes out to investigate? Nobody
really, because we didn't have a real accident with damage to property or persons. So we just made a report to the FAA that we had some kind of incident. They just take the information. If there's no accident, no damage, they won't come on site.
So if there are professionals, whether they are photographers, news people, whatever, and they are violating these new rules, how likely is it that the FAA will come out itself to investigate?
Very unlikely. Again, they don't have the manpower they needed for that, so they rely tremendously on state and local law enforcement. And they did set up guidelines for them to follow on how to respond to
right. And we have this release from the FAA, which basically says, in part, the agency also recognizes that state and local law enforcement are often in the best position to deter, detect, immediately investigate, and as appropriate, pursue enforcement actions to stop unauthorized or unsafe drone uses. Now, we talked to a lot of local law enforcement agencies who either really did not know that they were being asked by the FAA to do this, or frankly say, we don't have the manpower to enforce these rules.
Right, they're very, very busy, and so it's like a community effort. I mean, if somebody's doing something stupid, whether they're swinging a baseball bat or got a knife or have guns or whatever, citizens are going to call and complain to the police, and the police are going to then take action. But it's got to be up to the citizens to help. To help monitor the situation.
Paul, nationally, how is law enforcement reacting to this in terms of being asked by the FAA to deal with these issues? And are there any comparisons to other issues to make?
Well, I think that the FAA is trying very hard to get the local LEOs, or local enforcement officers, to work together with pilots to limit illegal usage. So I agree with Gene again that we've got to go out there as pilots and kind of self-police. Now, this is something we haven't seen with aviation before, but I think it's something that we really need to do. And I agree again with Gene that the public needs to be aware of what's legal and what's not. And simply flying over people ever is not legal. So that's something that we can do in helping police. Now, the FAA may not come out, but I am seeing a strong surge in enforcement actions. And I've seen a couple even in the last week. People have called into the show and they've talked about it. But what the FAA is doing is normally they're giving you a phone call and they're saying, hey, The 107 is now law. You must comply with that. It's kind of like a compliance rather than an enforcement action. Now, if someone continues to cause problems, the FAA will go after people, and they have gone after companies in the past before 107 with the Section 333 exemptions. They went after Skypan, which was a $1.9 million fine.
Now, Gene, we should make it clear, if the bad activity is something like peeping through some of these windows or crashing your drone into somebody's house deliberately or doing something like that, that violates criminal law, and your local police will pursue it.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah. Lionel, what is your biggest concern in terms of these drones out there in proximity to your airport?
Our biggest concern is obviously a collision with an aircraft, either on takeoff or landing, and no matter what size of the aircraft. So, and that's where the importance of the education is there, because people like Gene that professionally train and know where to go and how to do it are not our concern. They know the rules. They're the ones, daddy and their kids getting a Christmas gift and going to a park next to an airport and starting to fly, and not realizing where they are, what the rules are, how high they really are, and get too close to an airplane and have something happen.
And we're talking about people doing stupid things, but obviously we live in a dangerous times, and you can imagine something like this or something worse than this being used in proximity to a commercial airport.
Absolutely. There could be definitely terrorist activity linked to that.
So what's your defense? I mean, how do you defend against this? Because airports, have to be open in terms of the airspace to get to and from them.
At this point, the only thing we can do is just try to respond to the site and find the operator and see what's going on. And that's where the law enforcement gets involved, because outside our fence, it's not our jurisdiction. And then that gets reported to the FAA. Again, the FAA is working on testing different technologies to detect drones, even some to disable drones, but we're not there yet.
And Gene and Paul, where is this going? Because obviously, even though there are stricter rules on commercial operators that are not, with Amazon, for instance, thought about deliveries by drone. That seems to be off the boards right now. Are we going to get to a time where the commercial use of this technology is more available?
I see an explosion in this pretty soon. They're going to put on different identifiers on these drones so they can be tracked. There'll be flight levels, and Amazon will be able to fly between 500 and 512 feet, and they'll have different companies at different levels, and they'll have this all synchronized, just like they do with manned aviation. It's all synchronized and harmonized, and everything works beautifully right now, and it'll be the same with drones.
And Paul, even right now, I mean, there have been some people, some hobbyists that have kind of been pushed out of the drone hobby, because I know professional photographers who are, lawyers who help out fire departments and so forth. They say that these new rules are so cumbersome that it's really not even worth the effort to fly.
Well, it depends on who you are and if you know about airspace and sectionals, and you can read a sectional map and know where you can and can't fly. That's really the point of that test. The FAA wants to know, do you know where you can fly and where you can't fly? And to go back to one of your statements about drones and airports, recently, just in Denver, about 6 hours north of where I am, they've been testing a drone fence, which does inhibit the drone from going by the airport and actually makes the drone land so they can learn where the operator is. The drone's home point is where the operator took the drone off. So when this drone fence works, the drone goes back to that home point where the operator is. It's a great way to know who was flying the drone and really deter activity. Now, the rules are cumbersome in the sense that the FAA is still kind of working out the kinks. This is so new for them to really input these new rules and get the systems in motion. Frankly, they did a beautiful job in getting the licensing done. And now we're seeing them work into a system where we're getting airspace clearances. Right now, it's just not happening. If you look at the number of clearances that have been approved versus how many people have applied, it's astronomical how many or how little, it's less than 1%, have actually been approved. So the FAA needs to come up with a system so that pilots can call in and say, hey, look, I've got to fly in Class Delta airspace 3 miles out, and I'm only going up to 150 feet.
We have to take I'm sorry, we're going to have final thoughts in a moment, but we have to take a quick break right now from our guests, and we're going to come back in a moment. Plus, what some of you were saying about another type of regulation, so stay with us. Welcome back. The number of commercial drones is expected to quadruple in just the next 4 years. Will regulations be able to handle the influx? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Paul, the number of these drones out there are growing so much, but there are also people out there who are getting them for the holidays. What would you say to people who are going to take these home for the holidays about the need to be safe out there?
If you do end up getting a drone for a loved one or someone in your family, make sure you also get them some sort of education, whether that's through the Drone U or through any other school. I think it's so imperative that they become educated. Also, I'd love to see the FAA also open up the door to people who do know how to fly. But the only way we're going to progress this industry is through education. All
right. And Gene, what would you say to the people out there who may be concerned about all these things buzzing around their neighborhoods?
Well, I'd say they better get used to it, because there's going to be a lot more use of these over the next 5 years. There's all kinds of commercial applications, and they're going to be out there a lot. But they're not going to be snooping in on people. They're out there for commercial reasons.
But there are also a lot of people who are taking them back to their neighborhoods and may or may not know what they're doing.
That's true, yeah. But so those people who are hobbyists, I mean, it's a totally different league there. Those people have to know, and as Paul said, you gotta teach them some rules.
And Lionel, what would you say to people who are flying in and out of our airport who may be legitimately concerned about whether these things are going to be in the way of their planes taking off or landing?
Oh, I wouldn't be too concerned. I think when Gene mentioned that they're going to be around by that time, I think the FAA will have the rules well in place, and they'll keep adequate separation between airplanes and airport and the airspace.
Right.
So we'll have to share it.
These are incredible devices, but I guess the rules have to catch up with the technology.
Mm-hmm. Or just the knowledge of the customers. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about a much different type of regulation. Sarasota County is relaxing laws on food trucks. They can now roam freely around commercial and unincorporated parts of the county. Some businesses worry it could cut into their business. Here is what some of you are saying. David Lau writes, "Food trucks are a win-win for everyone. In a subtle way, they add an energy for our city. I believe all restaurants will win when more of an eat-out culture grows." Susan McLash writes, "They need to have parameters away from restaurants paying rent inside building. All restaurants need the same rules for cleanliness as well." And Nancy Nyberg writes, "Just like a restaurant, my concern is cleanliness and by abiding the rules when it comes to food storage. The rest of the politics is really not any of my concern." If you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks for everyone for being here tonight. Gene Payson is Chief Pilot Trainer at Unmanned Vehicle University. He is also the Chief Pilot for Troy Built Models. Lionel Gilbert is the Manager of Operations for the Sarasota Manatee Airport Authority. And Paul Aiken is the Chief Pilot of Drone U. He also co-hosts the Ask Drone U podcast and is the author of Living the Drone Life. There we go. When we return, we'll have a final look at your weather, plus a tense and terrifying morning in Jacksonville after nearly a dozen people are taken hostage in a bank robbery. We'll have the details in our